Hi there, and welcome to Return on Podcast. I'm Tyler Jefcoat, and just as a reminder, guys, this episode of Return on Podcast is brought to you by Seller Accountant. Seller Accountant is your go-to solution for bookkeeping and fractional CFO if you are a growing, scaling e-commerce brand. Really appreciate their support that allows me to do this show. Hope you guys will find them at selleraccountant.com. Learn more about their services. In today's episode, guys, we have I think just a fascinating discussion. Will Basta of ACV is my guest, and his take on how investing is evolving in the e-commerce landscape, how the guys got it wrong 3 years ago, and how business models are shifting. They're diversifying. They're becoming more intelligent when it comes to the marketplaces they're selling on and their supply chain strategy. Oh my gosh, Will just has such a deep network. I think he said he recently became a resident of the United Emirates as a part of his plan to kind of expand into the Middle East. He's got where he lived. I think he said he lived in Mexico for 8 to 10 months to try to get things kickstarted there. He has relationships in South America. Still doing, I think he said 70 to 80% of his supply chain sourcing from Asia. But what is the current frontier for taking a brand that was probably oversimplified 3 or 4 years ago and make it into a real business? This conversation with Will Basta is an incredible deep dive really into what we both think on that topic. So without further ado, let's dive into this episode of ROP with Will Basta. It's time to maximize profitability and cash flow. It's time to learn habits and hacks from the best e-com CEOs. It's time for Return on Podcast with me, Tyler Jefcoat. All right, welcome to today's episode of Return on Podcast. Guys, today I'm very excited to bring my new friend Will Basta into the show. Will from ACV. Will, how are you doing today, man?
Good, man. Tyler, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it is a beautiful day, both where you are there in Spain and me here in Georgia to not be outside. So this is kind of one of those like, thank God for air conditioning kind of days. But yeah, so listen, man, I want to talk all things investing, strategy, e-commerce with you. We've got a really great discussion on tap here, I think. But I feel like the audience here needs to get to know you just a little bit, Will. Like
Of course.
normally something goes terribly wrong or whatever in someone's life when they decide to become an entrepreneur. Like what was your kind of quick journey from whatever day job to ACV?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I started in the corporate world in health tech. So I worked for a Fortune 500 company early on in my career for about 4 years. I had a passion for health, and I still do on a personal level. But that's why I was sort of in that industry on the non-clinical side. But I quickly realized I wanted to work for startups that you have more of a connection to leadership and the direction of the organization. So I worked for a few different healthcare startups, health tech startups, throughout that period post DaVita. DaVita was the company I worked for. Most people are familiar with that company. And during that period of time, I draw a lot of parallels between working for a really small startup to being an entrepreneur, because you work directly with entrepreneurs, hence the
Mm,
CEOs, the founders, et cetera. And there's always a lot of curveballs and stuff come out of left field and stuff, and it's very fast paced, right? And so during that period of time, I was obviously on the side getting involved a little bit on in the digital space. I had a first product on Amazon that was like a pet product. It was like a cat toy,
mm,
mildly successful, et cetera. But I really got to learn the back end of the systems and all of that. And throughout that period of time, I was getting more and more involved. Had a few successful different ventures in e-commerce, and then my business partner in the health space, actually, and my business partner and I, we met circa 2018, and we were in a sort of similar kind of investment in the e-commerce space. And around 2019, we started to notice these companies were popping up that were essentially doing e-commerce as a service for people that are not, most of the time, not involved in e-commerce, but really want to tap into that asset class.
mhm,
But what we
mhm,
realized is that most of the organizations that were out there were essentially really hollow on the inside. A lot of just third
mhm,
party piecemealing them together. Infrastructure was pretty much non-existent. Really just layered of third parties, and a business model that had a lot of potential. And so that's where the light bulb turned on. We said, hey, we can do this better. Let's bring in our experience, essentially what we know how to do, and do this the right way, essentially a service for others, but a profit sharing model. So we didn't invent the model, but we refined it and legitimized it. And that was the goal at a small scale, essentially building out Amazon and Walmart businesses for investors primarily outside of the e-commerce space, right? We did that with about 10 clients for about a year. And then we realized we really had something, and we went full swoop in 2021 on marketing. And to the day where we are today, we've built over 1,000 businesses for clients in
Wow.
multiple different countries, primarily US based, obviously. And we started with a wholesale and private label model. And now in the last year, we've obviously transitioned and changed with a lot of things that have happened just in the industry and consumer markets, et cetera. And now where we are today, we essentially run a similar model, but we work on a portfolio type approach with multi-channel. So we focus on TikTok, Amazon, Walmart, Etsy, and then also overseas in different markets like the Middle East and the UK, Canada, and Mexico. And so we provide the same service, but it's way more advanced, and we're a lot more lean as we are right now. But honestly, just telling the story, it's sort of like a snap of the fingers. Stuff just happens, right?
Wow.
And then you're on
Wow.
a fast train. And now we're, going on 5 years. So
That's great. Now, so you mentioned a couple things I want to go kind of double click on there. One is
yeah,
you kind of talk a lot, and even as I was reading some of your content, this idea of identifying promising investment opportunities. Like you kind of mentioned there, hey, our first customers were actually passive investors, investors that didn't really want to be Amazon operators, but
yeah,
understood or at least saw some potential in an e-commerce business as an asset class that maybe should occupy a portion of their portfolio.
yeah,
Can you, I guess, sketch that for me a little bit for like the passive investor out there? I don't know. I'm thinking about the guy that
yeah,
sold his Allstate agency last year, or is he and his son want to get into business. They have a little bit of capital. Like, how should someone view e-commerce as an investment if they're not really pumped about being the operator day to day? Is that a good
yeah.
idea? Is this something that should be a part of their portfolio?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it really obviously depends. I mean, the commonality we have between our clients is none of them have time, and so we're doing 99% of the work for them, right? And
Okay.
so there's a few different ways you can approach it, right? So if you're someone that doesn't have time to put into it, I wouldn't get involved in e-commerce because it's very complex, sophisticated, it's constantly evolving. There's a lot of ups and downs, and it's just difficult, and will take a lot of time to be successful in it. And so essentially, if you're looking to get into it, I mean, this is an industry that some people on the surface might say, hey, Amazon's been around forever, e-commerce has been around forever. We're in the infancy stages right now. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but last time I looked, it's about 20 to 25% of actual transactions in retail are e-commerce. For
Oh
me, it's like
wow.
100%, but that's
Yeah.
averaging, all consumers, right?
Right.
And Nasdaq predicts by 2040 it's going to be about 90 to 95%. So there's monumental growth ahead, not just in the US but across the world. And so, in my eyes, it's with 100% an asset class, and it can be sustainable, and it can be. I don't like to use the word passive because nothing in this world is truly passive, but it can
Right.
be very, very hands off if you partner with someone in the space, like our company or other organizations that do stuff like that for the
Mm,
clients that have built out an infrastructure, understand what to look for, how to adapt, how to keep what some pieces traditional, but at the same time innovate. And that can turn into sort of an asset that, yeah, is cash flowing and can appreciate in value over time, sort of like real estate. And you can exit if it's done and executed the right way, but also doing with a partner that's incentivized to grow it. And so I'm a
right.
big believer. I don't want to be biased in this, that it's an asset class. A big part of my investments in general is e-commerce, right?
Mhm.
Granted, I'm in the industry, right? But it's in my balanced portfolio of real estate, having a stock portfolio, a little bit of crypto and e-commerce, right?
Right.
And then just other ventures here and there. And I think it is very, very early on, but
Mm.
it's all about partnering with the right people and knowing what you're getting into and the kind of
Mhm.
capital you're willing to deploy. That can dictate the success, and also making sure that who you work with is not spinning the same wheel of everything that everyone else is doing, because there's always new things that are coming in e-commerce. And there's always new markets and marketplaces, right? And so it's
Mm.
it's keeping that sort of fine balance between that. But I'm 100% on board with it being an asset. And if someone has, they are, liquid, and they're looking to put into some money into something that's outside of your traditional opportunities like real estate and stocks, I would 100% look into e-commerce as one of them.
No, it's really good. I mean, it's actually refreshing, right? That's the optimistic take, which is just objectively true, is that we are Although Amazon may be showing some signs of maturing a little bit, the
Yeah,
overarching kind of macroeconomics of e-commerce are, as you said, just very early in the cycle. And so I think being nimble, being able to adapt, evolve as the opportunities evolve. Like 3 years ago, nobody was buying anything on TikTok. Now it's huge, right? So it's like I do think there's reason for optimism, and I just agree with that 100%. By the way, this podcast wouldn't exist if we didn't believe the intersection of investing and e-commerce was a thing. So
right.
I also share
Yeah,
your
yeah,
bias.
yeah,
Um, but I think where a lot of the investors, and I've had the privilege of advising several of the investor guys that were kind of buying assets back during we call it like the feeding frenzy of the pandemic. Where they messed up was not knowing how to identify strategic assets. They were buying shitty businesses, frankly, well, and as a result,
yeah,
things got weird for them. And so, my question to you, as somebody who's
yeah,
seen a lot of these deals, I guess it's a two-pronged question. I'll let you answer it however you want to. Like, what should an investor look for? And what are investors looking for in businesses that are worthy of kind of this kind of investment? And then maybe the flip side of that is if someone listening to this is the operator, what are the things that should be baked into their business to give them kind of a maximum appeal to an investor that might be looking at their business to buy over the next couple of
yeah,
years?
yeah. That's a super good question. I think just to touch back on one piece too, like Amazon is mature, right, in the US, but and I will speak to this later too, but that's why we look at other markets. It is just getting started in places like the Middle East, right? It's like Amazon circa 2015 there. That's why we're in Dubai,
Wow.
right? And we have US clients that have Amazon businesses in Dubai as well, right? So it just depends on where you are, but as a platform in the US, without a doubt, it is. In terms of the second piece of your question, sorry, if you can just repeat that. I just lost my train of thought
No,
the
no, no,
second
no.
half of
I
that.
think it's such a good.
Yeah,
I mean, you were double clicking on the fact that Amazon, if it's just .com, is a narrow view of Amazon, and you're 100% right. And we will circle back to some of that strategy. What I asked you is like, as investors look at buying
that's what it.
e-commerce brands, or as e-commerce brands look to become investor
Yeah,
worthy, what are those check
yeah.
boxes or things that people are looking for now?
Yeah, and also and it touches on the other thing you mentioned. I mean, we look at this now, there's a lot of private equity firms and groups like that that are have a bad taste in their mouth about
Right.
e-commerce because there was that huge bubble about it and then a lot of failure. There was a lot of
You're
success
burned.
too, but
Right.
they
Yep.
got burned. Exactly. And so there is that kind of thing in the industry a little bit, but in no means does that mean that it's a dead industry at all.
Mm,
I think when it comes down to looking at investing in e-commerce, you need to look at the big picture and think in the future, right? Not just think of right now what's making money, but where is there more internet penetration happening, right? Where is more online spending happening? What are trends on consumer trends in terms of people purchasing impulsively, like social commerce, which is TikTok, right? Social commerce is the subset of e-commerce, essentially buying within a social media app. You're not going to TikTok to buy products, you're going to Amazon to buy products. So social media purchasing is the future of this decade, and it's growing 5x faster than regular e-commerce, right? And that's why
mm,
having a balanced portfolio in e-commerce is what you need to be looking for, not just thinking one platform, one model, like Amazon wholesale or Amazon private label, and that's it. You need to be looking at this as a portfolio approach, meaning you're actually tapping into all different consumer markets because, for example, Walmart, I mean, they beat Amazon in a bunch of different categories, even though they have less revenue when it comes down to their online presence, right? But certain categories, you'll see them sort of take the lead, right? And so it depends on these factors and also demographics that are buying on certain platforms. And so I think if I were going into this right now, what I would be looking for is putting my money into a portfolio, meaning 3 or 4 different platforms, potentially 2 different markets, US and another market, where you can touch on the social media aspect of it, whether it be a TikTok, obviously Instagram shop, stuff like that, have that presence, which can build out a brand. And then
mm,
once that brand gets established, you can tap into Amazon a lot easier with that brand, right? Because it's
right.
already made it. And making sure that part of the strategy behind all of this is obviously influencer collaboration. People buy from people, and that's also what the future is now too. So having, influencers, and they don't have to be The Rock or the Kardashians. This can
Right.
be micro influencers, sub 50,000, and you can have 10, 15 of them, right? And you can
Yep.
have an influencer that only has 1,000 followers, but they get hundreds of thousands of views on TikTok, and that can grow a brand tremendously, right? And so making
Mm,
sure you have the pieces of all the new things that are happening and ensuring that you're not aligning with just the old techniques that used to work and whatever you're investing in is not just running this, because you can still be successful with Amazon wholesale, but it takes a lot of money. There's a lot of headache, and there's a lot of problems with that too, unless you are putting in a serious amount of capital if you're starting fresh right now. And
Mm,
on the private label side, obviously, we talked about this with ad spend. That's why we're a big believer of driving TikTok with PL and then moving that into Amazon, right? So driving the presence there. And so to sum all that up, it's really having, and I hate to use the typical terms of a diversified approach, but it really
mm,
is at this point. It's not just, oh, you're going to be on this platform, that's going to be your e-commerce asset. Because at the end of the day, we all know the biggest risk, one of the biggest risks of all this is, unless you're doing a Shopify or something, you are on a third party platform. They change
mm,
policies, things adapt, algorithms evolve, all of that, right? And so making sure that you're on multiple different platforms and you connect them into one essential portfolio that has the ability to move into other markets, whether it be just Canada or something like that, I think is the smartest way to approach it. And we could spend a whole podcast on that.
yeah.
I'm trying to keep that answer sort of short, but in the long term, that's what's going to be successful. And making
Yep.
sure that what you're developing and who you are partnering with, if you're partnering with someone on it, is looking at, okay, well, what is going to be potentially the next platform? Like, for
Mhm.
example, we're looking at, this isn't even the next platform, it's a huge platform, Mercado Libre. That is the Amazon of Latin America, right? And so that is a company that, they're really big on Mexico right now. And if you're in the health and wellness space, you go to Brazil for selling supplements. Like, these are things that a lot of US sellers don't even think about because they feel like it's unattainable. But
Yeah.
that's something that we're really focused on. A big part of what I do for my company is looking at international markets and how that can tie into a US investor and how they can capitalize on that. Because the US is, even though we are huge consumers, we're not the only ones spending money online, right? And so
Yep.
we need to make sure you have your eyes open to the future, because we're only going to become more global as a
Mm.
world and as consumers overall. So
No, that's really good. It's funny. I'm a redneck from Georgia, so I don't play a lot of ice hockey here, Will. But there's this statement that's kind of like, skate to where the puck's going, right? That kind of thing in hockey, and it's the
yeah,
idea that we can really work hard to optimize what we're currently doing, but we're going to run out of juice at some point to optimize our current listings.
for
I
sure.
love the idea of getting on board with, okay, where's the market heading? Like, if we just look 20 years ago at what US spending habits were and find countries that look a lot like that right now, the natural flow. You guys think about the barriers. By the way, I love what you just said, Will, early in your comment about, like, what are the barriers to people purchasing stuff the way we want them to, and where are there countries where those barriers are being removed? India, the Middle East, the Latin America, and then we can either. And I guess there's a couple of acceptable strategies as long as you have one. But one acceptable strategy, and I want to continue to double click on it with you here, is to say, okay, the market is growing with less competition and more opportunity, and the barriers to entry, while there's still some, are becoming less, kill switch-ish. Those things are happening. So let's talk about this a little bit more, because I would imagine for the average American investor, it's like a little bit daunting to be like, okay, great, well, let's just go to Brazil. Yeah, awesome. Let's just like hang a shingle. We've heard how like
Yeah,
crappy
yeah.
VAT is. I mean, like, where do you?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, maybe this is. I don't know where you want to take this, but like somebody that's overwhelmed that maybe has a $1 million Amazon business here in the States. Like, where do you start, or is where you start to hire the right person or bring the right team on?
It's bringing the right team on, right?
Yeah.
Unless you want to spend a lot of time connecting yourself, or if you're highly connected, you can do that. Like, when it comes down to it, it's the reason why we can bring our clients from the US to UAE, is because now we have facilities out there, we have a network, we have boots on the ground, we have an infrastructure we built over the last year, and so we facilitate that for our clients. But if I was a seller myself in the US, I mean, there's a trust factor if you're not located there, number one, right? That you have
Mhm.
to figure out. And so it's really making sure you have the right partners that have the right connections on supply chain and logistics throughout these regions. That's the main part. I mean, I can't speak to. I mean, I look at where we started bringing our businesses into the Middle East, and that was essentially, I'm a resident now of the UAE, and so I
Oh,
started
nice.
by going there and becoming a resident. And getting involved in the networking over there and understanding how commerce works in that region specifically for about 3 to 6 months, and then building out, you're looking at warehouse spaces and building out people you trust and understanding, this is how we're going to do this. And then we're not just throwing our clients in there into the fire, we prove it out and we understand these are our team members now that are located there. And so if someone wants to go into this market, this is how we can do it for them because we've essentially built the blueprint around it and we know how to facilitate it. But again, that took, close to a year to build out. And so, you know what I mean? It's so going back to your question, I mean, it's really finding the right team or partner that can facilitate that for you overseas. And ultimately, yeah, it might mean giving up a little bit piece of your pie that you have in that market for that, but you're getting a new market and you're getting additional revenue from that, right? So you have to look at it
Yeah.
in that aspect. And so if you want
Yeah,
to
and I love that.
expand, you expand with someone who can do it and already has boots on the ground in that region, in that market.
Well, and part of this, and we didn't mention this earlier when we were talking about investing, we're talking about assets and stuff like that. But guys, 4 years ago, the investment market was really irrational in that it rewarded very kind of three SKUs and a cloud of dust on a single marketplace with one supplier with one ad campaign, right? There was a lot of kind of regression to simplicity because the aggregators were trying to operationally integrate a million assets at one time. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And so they were paying a premium for businesses that if you and I were in any basic business class in the world, we would be like, oh, that's kind of a flimsy one point of failure kind of business. And I think what Will's describing, which makes so much sense to me, is that there has been a kind of a regression back to common sense. Like, hey, you need to build some fundamentals into your business. Be nice
Yeah.
to have multiple channels of and streams of revenue. Yeah, speak to that a little bit more, and then I want to talk about the supply chain side of this.
Yeah, I mean, I like to use like sort of the analogy. It's like if you're, and this can be applicable to a lot of different things, but if you're in real estate and you come across just $1 million, like, are you just going to buy $1 million house in one city or in one
Right.
region? No, you're going to want to leverage that across different regions in the U.S. where the markets are good and it has different kind of benefits coming from it to build that real estate portfolio. And I really look at e-commerce as real estate, right? It's a
Mm.
piece, it's a digital piece of, if you look at the internet boom back in the 90s or early 2000s, like the dot com, all of that, it's, if you own dogs.com, and I don't know what that would have sold for, but like, that this is not the exact same comparison. And
Right.
again, it's different when it's on third party platforms, but the way that I look at it is really, it's as simple as that. And, there's a lot of unknowns, in terms of, we're not going to say that just because, Amazon came into Dubai, I think around 2019, just because they're only 5 years, they're not going to have, it's not going to be exactly the same as Amazon US. There are different things that sell there. Obviously, there's obviously well, one thing I can say that's really great is the average purchasing price is double what it is anywhere else in the world. It's over $100, which is insane. People have a lot of money there, so they spend a lot. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of Western products that we can get our hands on because we're a distributor as well, that we can get into that market that we know they don't have access to yet that they're going to buy. And we mix that with, your traditional Middle Eastern, maybe some Arabic kind of products that obviously do well for cultural reasons and and
Sure.
and all of that. And so it's having that kind of approach where it's not like exactly how it works in the US is going to be exactly how it works there. Obviously, it's a different market, but that's what also makes it exciting, right? And we're looking at margins there that are, if you're just doing traditional wholesale, I mean, they're 2 to 3x what they are in the US. And it's
Wow.
it's also the center of the world too. And so if you're getting and sourcing from Asia or anywhere in that region, I mean, it's a lot easier of an entry point. You don't have to worry about, any kind of issues with getting it into the country, and supply chain is a little bit cheaper and all of that. And so there's all these little pieces that are great that we're seeing right now. Again, I'm not saying it's the best market ever, but of what we've seen so far, it's a very, very exciting thing. So
Well, and so you started to do a great transition. Let's talk about the supply chain for a minute. So, like, the biggest market is still the United States. There's exciting traction happening in some of the ancillary markets. But one of the biggest pain points, and you know this, Will, from your brands and from your clients, is we still have like 90% of our supply chain coming from Asia. The interest rates and cost of capital are really gross right now. And so the penalty for screwing it up on our inventory ordering, whether it's a quality issue or just the time that the container's on the water, that penalty is high right now. It sucks. It's not good. And I'm just wondering, like, are you guys exploring any other supply chain options that you're seeing or you're
yeah,
excited about?
yeah, for sure. I mean, as of right now, I'd say we're still about 70% in Asia, but over the
Okay,
last year and a half, that has been decreasing and decreasing. And we've been
cool.
pushing business into Latin America for a lot of reasons. I mean, labor might be a little bit more expensive, but trade relations are better. It's a little bit easier to get stuff in. It's faster. It's closer, and it's good to work with manufacturers from there of our experience so far. And so we're really, really bullish on Latin America overall, whether it be Mexico, Colombia, Peru, etc. We are Our warehousing is primarily based in Texas, but we're looking at facilities in Tampa because that's really the entry point from the Caribbean and Latin America in terms of products and importing into Florida region. And so we're really excited about that piece. And I just think in general, there's obviously geopolitical potential reasons too to make sure you're getting manufacturer contacts outside of China because who knows, right? You just never really
Right.
know. And so that being said, we look at it as just like the future in general because what we're seeing in terms of how easy it has been compared to the problems that we've all experienced bringing stuff over from Asia, right? And a lot of it's location reasons, but also just again the trade relations are pretty clean between the U.S.
Mhm.
And South America, and so we're big on that. Obviously, there's a lot more to see and come from that. We also have manufacturers in Greece. I can't speak too much of that, but they produce a few different products for us, and that's really great to work with. When we go into the German market as well, that's going to be probably a big supplier for us throughout Turkey and
Yep.
Greece. But I'm really big on Latin America. That's my big thing. Obviously, India is huge. If we look at Asia as a whole, right?
Right.
A lot of stuff that comes from Vietnam is originally coming from China anyway. So there's just a lot. There's a lot of different pieces of this puzzle, but
So
the direction
let
we've
me
been
ask
going
you,
is Latin America.
because I've had so many of our clients, including even the fund that I represent, like we're like, yes, we buy Will's argument. Let's go meet with some Mexican suppliers. Let's go to Colombia. Let's go to Venezuela. Let's go to Peru. Let's go to these other countries. And I would just say from my personal experience, I've had a couple of success stories in Colombia, but for the most part, I've sunk months of energy. I say me, but it's really mostly my clients. I'm just kind of sitting
Yeah,
there as the CFO crying
yeah,
with them. I'm in the fetal position with them, Will, because it didn't get the traction we wanted. Like, are there
yeah.
a couple of like nuggets for success? Hey, you're the US PL or brand builder. You're wanting to do this and not waste your time. Like, are there any hacks you could give us to be like, this is how to not fuck this up? Like anything you could give to us there?
Uh, okay, without giving all of our secrets and our manufacturers away, you should,
Number
without a doubt,
888.
have
Yeah.
someone you
Yeah.
can trust who is bilingual, number
Okay.
one,
Okay.
who's a Spanish business person, okay, not Spanish, but Latin American, or they could be Spanish, but they speak Spanish fluently and they're native Spanish speaking,
Got it.
to work with you on negotiations and that. And that comes in through a contact too. I used to live in Mexico for about 8 to 10 months.
Mm,
I do travel. I've been traveling my whole life. That's part of the reason why I've been leading the initiative globally. And so I do have contacts in business throughout Mexico City, down through Bogota, et cetera. And so that obviously is an unfair advantage. But
sure.
everything that I do and I connect us with as a company trickles down to our clients. And so it goes back to the service or the partnering piece of if you're doing it yourself, it could be a little bit difficult. But the one tip I would say is don't go in there without, not saying that anyone's dishonest, but if you have someone who is native speaking in Spanish, you can get a lot more done and you can do it more effectively. And you can probably get
Right.
connected into better places if you have that partnership in place.
No, that makes sense. That's really good. I mean, it's funny. My intention in asking that question wasn't to tee you up, but it really sounds
No, I
like
know.
you're making a hell of an argument for don't waste your time. Hire Will to do this for you. So let me give you a second to kind of stump here for 30 seconds. Like if someone heard any of what you just said about Dubai or getting more intelligent with your supply chain or looking at multi-channel expansion and diversification, uh, where can they find out more about your services? And maybe to kind of add to that, what exact pain, if she's feeling it today, she needs to reach out to your team. What does that look like, Will?
Yeah, so there's a couple different pains. So there's probably a lot of listeners here are they're already involved in e-commerce. If they are, that could be as simple as they've sort of flatlined on Amazon, right? It plateaued, and they're looking to juice what they have or expand upon what they have, right? And we do that for clients as well. Or there's the person who's liquid and they're trying to tap into e-commerce and they just don't know where to look and who to partner with, right? So those are the two type of clients we bring on. They can always book a call with us at ecomwithacv.io. That's ECOM with acv.io. Our Instagram is at ecomwithacv. That's an acronym for Accelerated E-commerce Ventures. You can find us on YouTube, etc. There's a lot of educational stuff on our website. Our calls are not really salesy. Our thing at this point now as a company is not about bringing on as many clients. We have consultation calls. We learn what you're looking for, et cetera. And if there's a fit on both sides, then we continue from there. And there's
Yep.
a lot of different things that we offer, but that's essentially where you can reach out to us. And yeah, we also do meet in person too. Even though this is a digital space that we're all in, our company has always kept traditionality. So we shake hands if there's a request for that. They can come visit our facility in Dallas if they want. They can come see me in South Florida, etc. And so, yeah, that's where you can find us.
And so, by the way, Will gave us a lot of links there. My team will make sure, Will, that those are all the website, the social links, so that we have those in the show notes, both for the podcast
Cool.
and for YouTube. So you guys will be able to connect with Will. So again, if that problem set sounds interesting to you, you like to have it solved, or you were thinking about that, Latin America supply chain expansion, and it kind of feels overwhelming. You could spend the next 5 years developing the network and relationships to get that done, or it sounds like you could just reach out to Will's team and maybe shortcut that. Will, it's been an awesome discussion. I want to just ask you a final question. I ask everybody that joins the ROP show here.
Of course.
Is there a habit, hack, rhythm, part of your life that you feel like gives you an outrageous return on investment?
Yeah, I say there's a couple things. I need to talk to two of them. One of them is very relevant because obviously I'm not home right now. So my whole life I have traveled and I started my company when I was away. I tend to be innovative when I'm away. It changes my environment and it lets me think outside the box when I leave my home office. And it could be a 2-day trip, it could be domestic, it could be overseas. But for me, it's really, really freeing. And I tend to do a lot of good business when I'm away. And a good hack for that was when I'm in Europe is I'm actually 6 to 9 hours ahead of everyone. So I can enjoy my day and really get ahead of a lot of different things. And I feel different when everyone wakes up. And so it's sort of a nice hack on my side. When I am home, there's a few different things. I'm not religious on all the stuff that I do, but every morning for me, taking an hour walk with my dog
Hmm.
and clearing my head without my phone is probably the best thing that I do to start my day. Getting some sunlight and just walking around with my dog in the neighborhood for at least 45 minutes. That really gets me going, to be honest with you. And I get excited for the day because then you can think freely. You're not on your phone. I avoid my phone for the first hour of the day if I can. And yeah,
That's a fantastic hack, and I struggle with that. Even if I go take a run, I'm training for a half marathon, which
oh,
I'm
congrats.
I'm 6'3" plus 240. Was built great as a tight end, not built great as a distance runner, But I
Yeah.
struggle not to have something audible or a podcast in my head, and occasionally, and actually, it's one of the reasons I joined a kind of a group fitness gym here in town. I was there an hour before you and I
Mm,
jumped on this call, and it's because I need like hard work and human connection without the noise of
yeah.
having the phone. So I just second what Will just said. That's a massive hack, is to detach electronically for like a solid. Can we do it for 90 minutes a day, guys? That would be awesome. Like, it's not easy. So well
Yeah,
said,
just
dude.
to
Well,
speak to that quick, actually, you said
yeah,
90 minutes. Sorry, one little nugget here is which I've been trying to do more and more. There's obviously science behind it too, but I actually wait about an hour before I have my coffee or an hour and a half because that walk will stimulate you with your natural levels and it won't affect you don't have a crash later in the day, at least what I've noticed as well, is actually getting the blood flowing first before you have coffee. If you are a coffee drinker out there or a tea drinker, avoid the caffeine for the first hour and your phone. And that will actually do wonders. Seems small, but huge impact.
huge. Love it. Actually, that sounds like some Andrew Huberman magic happening there, Will.
You
It's
get a little hint of my 10 years of health background. But
Love it. Love it. Hey, this has been a great episode. Will Basta from ACV. All the links will be in the show notes, guys. Will, thanks for joining us, man.
appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank
For
you.
everybody who made it 33 minutes into this pod, Will and I just are grateful. I say this every week, but guys, your time is valuable. Your energy is valuable. We hope you grabbed a couple of nuggets that make you better, make your business better. And obviously, if you need help with the kinds of things Will does, reach out to him. Till next week. Hope you guys kill it. Cheers.